Hello and welcome to PrepEve, where we revolutionize how you prepare for IELTS. So, as you remember, we are continuing with the Task Achievement Enhancer series. In our last lecture, we dealt with the informal letter and understood how we can address task achievement on that particular letter. So, let's recollect and understand what we did. Okay? So, I would give you time. Write in the comment section what did you learn in the last lecture. What were these 4 factors that made the task achievement parameter? Okay. So, the first one was the reason of writing the letter. You have to mention the reason why you are writing the letter. So, the person who is opening the letter or who is reading the letter must know in the very beginning the reason behind you writing that letter. Right. Number 2, you need to address all the 3 bullet points. As you know, in any IELTS letter there are 3 bullet points. So, you need to mention and address all those 3 bullet points in separate paragraphs in your IELTS letter. Number 3, you have to use the accurate tone depending upon the type of letter you are writing. If you are writing an informal letter, the tone is different. If you are writing a formal letter, it is different, and if you are writing a semi-formal letter, it is different, right? So, you need to cater to each and every tone. Ultimately, the final point, the 4th point or the 4th factor was to adhere to the word limit, which is to write at least 150 words, and I have emphasized it enough that 150 words means at least 150 words or more, but not exceeding 170 words, right? So, just write more than 150 words, but don't go beyond 160 or 70 words, right? And today we will be dealing with a semi-formal letter. How do you identify that a letter is semi-formal or not? Semi-formal letters are basically formal in nature, but they are written to the person who you know, right? So, you know the name of that person. For example, you are writing to your neighbor or to your professor or to your landlord. In these cases, you know the name of your professor, right? Obviously, you know their name. So, writing a letter to these people is semi-formal in nature. So, when you know the name, it's semi-formal. So, here we will be writing a letter to our neighbor. You have a problem with your neighbor. So, there is some problem, and when you are writing a letter to your neighbor, it's semi-formal in nature. Write a letter to your neighbor, and in your letter, write these 3 things. What are they? Number 1, introduce yourself. Number 2, describe how the problem bothers you. Number 3, what action would you want your neighbor to take? So, let's analyze the question. In the question, you've just told that you have a problem. They haven't mentioned what the problem is. So, you have to think on your own and come up with the problem. So, in an Indian society, we really have a lot of problems with our neighbors, isn't it? So, you can come up with any story. But here, I'll give you certain examples. You might have a problem with your neighbor regarding parking issues. They park at your parking spot and create ruckus there. Number 2, you could have problem related to garbage that they throw here and there, the messy environment that they create, or it could be that there's a stray dog, or maybe their dog barks too much and it's creating problem for you. Yeah? So, you can think of these problems when it comes to the neighbors. So, let's look at what we have to do in the letter. What do we have to write in the letter? Number 1, you have to introduce yourself to the neighbor. You have to tell who you are, where you stay exactly, and introduce yourself. Number 2, you have to describe how the problem bothers you. Okay, there's a problem, but is it bothering you? Maybe it's parking at the wrong spot, but you don't mind it. So, is it bothering you? You need to understand that it's bothering you, and you should mention how it's bothering you in the letter. Number 3, now that something is bothering you, you obviously want a solution for it. You're looking for a solution. What action would you want your neighbor to take? You need to tell your neighbor a solution. What do you want him to do to solve this particular problem? So, these are the 3 things that you have to mention in your letter, and Now we look forward on how we can cater to all these points. So as I said in the first lecture, you have to pause here and try to attempt this letter on your own and then move on and analyze what went wrong where. Hope you've completed the letter by now. Let's move on to the opening section of the semi-formal letter. How do you open the letter? You write dear followed by Mr. or Miss and then the last name of the person you're addressing the letter to. So we can address the letter to Mr. Lee here, right? So this is how you write the salutation, and then let's begin with the first bullet point. What was the first bullet point? First bullet point was to introduce yourself. I am your neighbor and I live just opposite to your house at house number, that hash is house number 1015. Right? So you have introduced yourself. You have told Mr. Lee that you are his neighbor and you live in so and so house number. Right? Then you write the reason of writing the letter. Why are you writing the letter to Mr. Lee? He is supposed to know that. I am writing to draw your attention to the inconvenience caused by the manner in which you dispose of your garbage. So now that you have introduced yourself, you mention the reason of writing the letter, and the reason is that you are very perturbed and it has caused a lot of inconvenience to you because Mr. Lee has been disposing of his waste or his garbage in uncordial manner. So you need to be clear on the reason of writing the letter. So in the very first paragraph we have answered the reason of writing the letter. Which was the inconvenience that was caused by him, and secondly we have also addressed the very first bullet point, which is to introduce yourself. Having done both of these, we have catered to the task achievement, right? Let's move on and focus on the second bullet point. Let's move on to the next bullet point, in which we have to describe why the situation bothers us. The garbage is being thrown on the road right in front of my residence. Not only does this reckless act creates a nuisance for the residents, but it also attracts pests. Moreover, what concerns me the most is the health and well-being of my family. On top of it, the sight and smell of the rubbish destroys the serene environment of the neighborhood. So, we have described why the situation bothers us in detail. So, first of all, the garbage is thrown right in front of my house, which is a very unpleasant thing. Next, not only does this reckless act creates a nuisance. So, the reckless act basically means a careless act. So, the careless act creates nuisance for the residents, and it also attracts pests. These pests or insects like mosquitoes can be disease causing, which is harmful for everybody in the neighborhood. Moreover, what concerns me the most is the health and well-being of my family. I care about my family, so I wouldn't want them to get sick because of these pests. So, it concerns me that my family should be in proper health. On top of it, the sight and smell of the rubbish destroys the serene environment. So, the environment of the neighborhood is really serene and beautiful. So, the sight and the smell of the rubbish, the garbage that's thrown here and there in front of my house, ruins the serene environment because of its dirty smell and awful sight. So, I wouldn't want that to happen in my neighborhood. Simple as it is. So, we've described these things are bothering us. Number one, the serene environment is getting impacted by the garbage. Number two, the pests are being attracted because of the garbage. Number three, it's right in front of my house and it can impact the well-being of my family. That's about it. Let's now address the third bullet point, which is to explain what action we want the neighbor to take. I request you to throw the waste at the appropriate place designated by the Resident Welfare Association. This will help us in keeping the locality clean and will also address my concerns. So this was a pretty simple paragraph. What actions do you want the neighbor to take? You want him to throw the waste at the appropriate place which is designated by the Resident Welfare Association. And how would this help you? How would this end the problem for you? This will end it because it will help us in keeping the locality clean and will also address my concerns. What were his concerns? His concerns were that the pests would impact the health and well-being of his family. So that would be catered to, and also the clean locality would be serene and would give a beautiful outlook. Right? So that's about it for this parameter, for this bullet point. Explain what actions you want him to take, right? So we have covered all the 3 bullet points and also the reason of writing the letter by now, which means we have catered to task achievement. Let's move on to the conclusion of the letter. Let's now conclude the semi-formal letter, hoping for a positive response from you. Now that we have told him that we have a problem for him and we have told him the actions that are desired out of him, we just can hope for a positive response from him. Now there comes the closing of the letter, which is also called the valediction, that is yours sincerely, and then you write your own name here. Okay, this is how you end a semi-formal letter. Now let's focus on the factors of task achievement. Have we completed those? First was the reason of writing the letter. Second was to address all the 3 bullet points. Third was to maintain accurate tone, which was semi-formal in nature, and the last was to adhere to the word limit, which is 150 words. So we have written more than 150 words, which basically means we have fulfilled all the 4 factors. Now coming to the structure. Yet again, while we are achieving the tasks at hand, we have also created an outline or structure for our own self. We start with dear, then we come to the reason of writing the letter and the first paragraph, which consists of the first bullet point. Then we come to the second paragraph, which consists of the second bullet point, and then we come to the third paragraph, which consists of the third bullet point. And ultimately we ended with the closing line, or yours sincerely in this case, right? So this is what we do, and this is how you see that a structure is made on its own without putting any extra effort. So I hope I'm clear here. This is how you have to address a semi-formal letter when it comes to task achievement. Basically, if you achieve the task, you will also incorporate good lexical resource, vocabulary, grammar, as well as cohesion and coherence. So unless you address the task at hand using proper lexical resources and grammar would not create that much of an impact when you do these things. So focus on these things and you will end up writing a great letter. Thank you and have a nice day.